My name's Kaylee Baker.
I'm McKenna, Crownover.
I'm DJ Niles.
And we are going to be doing our presentation about the Chinese playground. So here is a roadmap for our presentation. We will start with a summary and then move into key themes that were identified throughout the reading. DJ will then talk about how sports and physical activity contribute to Chinese Americans, and then Kenna will compare and contrast themes that we identified with others. And then we will talk about the summary. So to start off, the Chinese playground was the only public playground in San Francisco's Chinatown. It opened in 1927 and became a place for many working-class youth to gather in the 1930s and 1940s. At this playground, basketball quickly became a very popular pastime. Men and women who were represented at this playground played all the time. The installment of playgrounds became an issue when the number of children began to rise in large quantities. The kids played in streets and small yards, which became very dangerous as more kids joined in. Eventually, there became advocacy for children's play to be moved to playgrounds that were owned and operated by city governments. Henry S. Curtis was a child psychologist who initiated the emergence of the National Playground Association of America, also known as the PAA. With a lack of organized play spaces and facilities, children were roaming throughout the streets. Through unsupervised play, children could be more likely to be exposed to physical and moral harm. Through creating this public playground, it is seen as a means of training youth to become productive members of the workforce and ultimately of America. This physical activity in an organized playground will also lead to less juvenile delinquency. Through these playgrounds, children will be able to build character. When the playground opened, it quickly became one of the most used spaces in the city of San Francisco. The playground was the foundation for Chinese Americans' sense of belonging. Young people felt recognized and welcome. Older citizens would sit in the sun and enjoy watching the youth play. Working class members would stop by and watch games on their way home from work. Children who did not have much to do on a Sunday afternoon would gravitate towards the playground, watching people play and even joining in on some of the games. Younger kids would play in the sandbox or with the monkey bars. Older kids played more organized games like volleyball and basketball. Social limits and stereotypes were pushed through the game of basketball and other types of physical activity. So next, I'm going to talk about some key themes that were identified throughout the reading. There were three main themes that I had identified in a few ways. The first theme was underrepresentation. For Chinese Americans, there was only one public playground. There would always be a rush to get to the courts since the demand was so high. Chinese Americans were very disregarded in American society. However, at the playground, they felt powerful and seen. The playground was free, and it did not require a membership or a certain religious affiliation to be accessed. Young Chinese Americans were stuck playing in streets before the playground was built. They also did not have money, so when the older citizens began playing in basketball tournaments, they played in their street clothes while other teams had uniforms and warm-up gear. Another key theme that I identified was social limits. As the game of basketball began to increase, teams played in championships that were outside of Chinatown. These championships helped the players cross gender and racial barriers. Through playing other ethnic groups, Chinese Americans strengthened their confrontations at school, work, and on the street. They also learned to take pride in who they were. Lastly, stereotypes were a large part of this reading. Through basketball, girls pushed gender stereotypes. When playing, girls would exercise a different kind of freedom of movement. Staff members of the playground consisted of multiple different backgrounds, including African Americans, Chinese Americans, Irish Americans, and Korean Americans. The playground was a place where people of all different backgrounds could come together without politics or laws dividing them, allowing them to share stories with one another and bond.
Okay, next we're going to talk about how sports contributed to a better environment for the Chinese people at the time. So one of the first points I want to point out is sports helped build a sense of community. It was a hotspot for social gatherings and activities, kind of like what Callie had said prior. Many people of all ages would come there, whether it was just to watch the local games going on, whether it was basketball, tennis, volleyball, things of that nature, or to just sit there and just converse. And it gave a sense of pride to this growing environment as the population went from 7,744 to 17,787 between 1920 to 1940 in Chinatown in San Francisco. A second point to bring up is sports help provide a sense of belonging. All were welcomed. One of the main things said in this article was that the kids felt welcomed. The people that had ran the parks sat there and basically were inclusive with everyone, asking them what sports they enjoy playing, how they like to go about things, and things like that. Just giving them the opportunity to be free and play and have a chance to express how they feel. Third thing, sports help form a cultural and personal identity. A big thing with Chinatown was the sense of trying to get Americanized through sports. That was the goal of the people who opened the parks initially. What the people did, however, was use it to actually give a sense of cultural pride, whether it was competing against other nationalities, things like that in sports, primarily in basketball. They talked about how they actually formed their own form of like playing style, picking up full court pressing and then taking that and shooting well beyond outside like the paint, which is something that would go on to be a sense of the Bay Area in general, as you see with the Golden State Warriors and their offense. So you can kind of see the representation of that. To continue on this, sports also offered a place to escape from the reality around them. With the growing population, overcrowding happened and things like that, and it really caused people to feel like, where can I fit in, where can I belong? Like, it's a lot of things going on, and then with the increase of people, it also led to more violence and things of that nature. So it gave them a place to kind of get away from that, get your mind off of all the hardship and things of that, because with being an immigrant comes kind of being looked down upon to a certain extent, especially the people around them, not just their area, the area surrounding them. So, being able to play with like-minded people help you to feel better in some ways. And then for my final point, sports helped with gender empowerment. This article also talked about girls playing in these sports. Girls got the chance to play basketball and strengthen their athletic skills. It gave them a sense of confidence and free thinking, also something that Callie had talked about prior. And with that, it just helped them to grow and to kind of get more independent and be able to express themselves more. And I think overall, this all can be attributed to sports and just the park that was put there, allowing them to do all these things. So, yeah.
Okay, now we're going to talk about comparing and contrasting our key themes. So first we're going to start with stereotyping, and we're going to focus on women. So women are big on the stereotypes when we think of sports. When we see sports, we always gravitate towards men playing. In the Chinese playground, we talk about how women are different from that. They see them as a form of good self-esteem, free thinking, and sense of getting away for their jobs. This is very similar to Rin and Hoffman talking about women skaters, as they saw women as ruthless and strong-willed. Though, if we look at Holman's article, women are not accepted and more unacceptable for women to do something that seems as an aggressive sport. Looking through Yep's article, women are accepted, and they're seen as toughies and little fighters. So next we're going to talk about the fight in South Back Country, which was a way for men to show their manliness and not really a place for women. This is also contrasting towards this, as we see it women as strong-willed and playing basketball and very accepting, as this was not. So next we're going to talk about stereotyping for race. So Jackie Robinson and Lewis were very different in this aspect of the playground, as they were not accepted into the world of sports. Games were forfeited and stopped due to racism from other teams and fans. With Tiffany and Chin, a well-known figure skater who was nicknamed China Doll, and her mother was named Dragon Lady. It was a way of complimenting them, but also in a stereotypical way. As the playground, they seemed more of a diverse group due to them playing a variety of races. Race did not play a part in this game, but in a lot of the other articles we have read, it was a very big factor. So next, we're going to talk about compare and contrast on social limits. So social limits, living in like tiny communities, is how the playground first became, so this town would be able to play in a safe environment. In Holman's article, it was very similar because the ice hockey team was from a small town in North Dakota, which virtually had nothing around. They both came from a small town and rose to play as a big town. Wiggins was another article that also compared to this. They said they would have parties, and for all the slaves, and the white people would obviously choose where and when it would be, but it was a spot where they were wanted. So contrasting to this, the Olympic teams would get split due to suspicions and rumors that were causing problems in the sleeping quarters, but in the playground, everyone was welcome and free of charge. There was not a lot of problems, and it was a certain place where it was allowed. So another factor is cross-gender playing. Cross-gender was discussed in the playground due to more accepting nature of the women playing. In every reading I have read through this semester, there was no talk of women playing with men, or at least being accepting to this idea. So Smith's article was a very precise on this and who could play and how long they can play. As long as the playground was around, everyone was welcome, and it didn't matter who you were. So, under representation, well, we see this throughout the playground, as it's all about the feeling of not belonging and how them getting the playground gave them a sense of a second home. Similar to how Jackie Robinson was, he really didn't have a place, especially in the military, as he was always pushed aside for sports and was never really accepted for this position until he could play into the major league, which he wasn't accepted at first, but later on became loved. Next, we have the ice hockey. Started in a small area, just like the playground did, and there wasn't a lot of progress being made, and there was a limited access, but later on grew. With Wiggins' article, slaves, they would have parties, and it was really their escape from reality and a place to go, similar to the playground. They really didn't have a lot of choices, though, of who could participate in those parties, but many whites would come, but the playground, it was very open to anybody, but obviously for Wiggins' article, it wasn't really welcomed. Contrasting towards that, baseball was a very popular sport for the story article, and there were hundreds of teams. It didn't really matter where they played. It was a way of pretty much just access to anywhere. Next, on to change and stability. Okay, so these are the 6 that I would say that have changed over throughout the years, and now is like a big, I think, stability for sports and for everybody. Okay, so the first one is the use of drugs. No drugs are permitted, and if you're caught, usually it's the rule of you will get kicked off, and for college and university schools, you will be expelled. It's a very important rule now to make it fair for everybody. Next, sports for women. Women have the same access to sports as men do now, and there are different rules due to men and women being biologically different. Women's sports are welcomed as much as men. And though there are still men that think women's sports are a joke, it is the opportunity for women are equal to men. Next, we have race. Any race or ethnicity is welcomed into sports of men and women. As time goes on, I think sports are getting more diverse and opened. In the past, there were no laws or rules regulated. This could be due to the lack of people who run the sports to make sure the games are fair and safe. Now it's very much regulated, and some say too regulated, but it has made the game more fair and safe. But now some sports involve a lot of politics and opinions that do affect the game. So next is scoring. In Elsie's article, the Olympics had a lot of problems with scoring due to different countries going by different scoring systems. This could have been resolved with someone controlling and scoring the Olympics. Now we have a way of doing it, and it's not based on each country. Lastly, playgrounds are all over the world and welcome to anyone of gender, race, and ethnicity. Our country as a whole has progressed in lots in sports, and I think in the next 10 years there will be a lot of progress for everyone.
And then just for our conclusion, there's been a big change in inclusion and fighting for equality throughout sports. So especially in Yep's article about the playground, it talked about how Chinese Americans built their way up from playing in the streets to moving into an organized playground that was run by the government, all the way into creating different leagues for men and women, and even making it out of Chinatown in order to fight for equality against playing with others.
Sports influencing our society. Going off of that, I just can't help but notice that sports have a direct impact on how a society is expressing themselves, how they're going about life, things of that nature. One thing I really noticed is, especially in this article, we kind of talked about how Playgrounds are basically that place you go where you have nothing else to do, like nowhere else to be, where you find comfort at. In this article, it says, Felton Suin said, "We didn't have no place to go. That's why we were always at the playground. The playground is typically this place where you can express yourself, play a sport, regardless of race, gender, things of that nature, and express who you are."
I think for comparing and contrasting, I think it's shown a lot of like the differences throughout the years of each different article we've read and like different parts in the world and how it has affected race and gender. I think this article is very showing of how we've evolved in the world and how we're becoming more accepting of race and genders.
Thank you for listening.